Who here remembers the television show What Would You Do? Yeah. So sometime in like the early 2000s, it was kind of a gimmicky show where regular everyday people would be in some kind of public setting and there would be something going wrong. Someone stranded on the side of the road, someone locked out of their car, someone stealing something from someone's unattended purse, some kind of conflict or possible abusive situation. And they filmed basically what actors were doing, kind of enacting this difficult situation. And they filmed the regular everyday people seeing what their response to these kinds of distressing situations would be. It highlighted, in many cases, how the bystander effect works, how people will just say, that's not my problem. What I've got going on is more important. I need to keep it pushing. And then the stressful situation still remains what it is, unless someone intervenes. And then everyone's all anxious while you're watching the episode. Is someone going to help, even if you know the gimmick in the back of your mind? And then they film that one person who says, that's not yours, or I'll help you, who shows up and helps with that stressful situation, whatever it is. It was kind of a human interest television show that kind of brought to light how important it is for us to live in community and to care for one another. So what does that have to do with Christmas? I think a lot about the innkeeper, right? There was no room for them in the inn. And I think about this television show. What would you do? What if someone was filming that innkeeper at that time when they turned the Holy Family, away? Here is this family in distress, this mother who's 10 months pregnant and ready to give birth any second now. They are probably poor. They've been traveling a really long time. And then what does the innkeeper do? Says, not my problem. Just like on the show, people just walk on by. In the Bible, there is the phrase steadfast love, which theologian Walter Brueggemann translates as tenacious solidarity. God coming and being with us as we hear this story every year. That God took on flesh and dwelt among God's people in tenacious solidarity with everyone who was in need. It starts with a failure of care. Jesus is born on the margins. Jesus is at risk even before he was ever born. It is the biggest episode of What Would You Do? And we got our answer. You can stay in the back. You can hang out with the sheep and the goats and maybe the cows, but there's no room for you here. Emmanuel, God with us. And the holy birth, God coming into flesh, not as a reigning conqueror like the Isaiah text wishes for, one that will end all wars, but as a baby that needs care and tending. It is the biggest episode of What Would You Do ever? And the reason that we celebrate this intimate and vulnerable moment in the life of our God is because that question, which was asked 2,000 years ago, is consistently being asked of us now. God is made flesh among the most vulnerable? What would you do if they are in need in front of you? If you are confronted with their existence and with their vulnerability, can you, like God, practice steadfast love, tenacious solidarity, and be a companion to the most vulnerable? That's what this night asks of us. That is what this faith asks of us every day. We are constantly living in an episode of what would you do asked every time we see a homeless person in -10 weather. What would you do? What would you do? Every time we see a shooting against a marginalized group, against our queer siblings, the question is, what would you do? Because God made flesh is born in the most vulnerable of people. Every time we care for the least of these, Jesus promises that we are caring for them. The story of his birth is rooted in the gospel he will tell 30 years later. We are called to companion, to live into tenacious solidarity. This is the upsetting truth of the Christmas story. We have a non-traditional Christ candle today. After the service closes, I invite you to come take a look at the top of it. We've been blessed to host our queer siblings over the last month or so. They've used our space to gather and to grieve. Both the night after we've heard the news of the Club Q shooting and a couple of instances since, this has been a base where people can find community and healing and a place where their grief is safe. A friend of mine, Mike Martin, who you know, who will actually be preaching for us in a couple of weeks, he does this ritual with flash paper. He has you write what it is you need to let go of or what you need to release into the world. And sometimes when you drop the flash paper, it makes an imprint on the top of the candle. This is the candle that has been used in multiple healing services in the last month. And there are the marks of the hopes and the dreams of queer people in this city on our Christ candle. Tenacious solidarity, steadfast love, God with us. So the question remains as we spend this time in this most holy of nights, what would you do if God is being made flesh among you? If you are being asked to bear out some of God's vulnerability, can you receive back the care that God requires? There's those of us who hold multiple identities, where we may be the one with the power to help, and we may also be the one in need of help. God is in both places. Tenacious solidarity, steadfast love. This is something that this church does well, and I couldn't be prouder. But it's the root of this Christmas story, the vulnerability, the difficulty, the danger, the hope that needs tending, the joy that needs tending, the love that needs tending, the peace which needs tending. So tonight, we light our candles. A little bit of light to drive back the gloom. A tiny flame that needs tending. It's a ritual that we've done for a very long time as Christians, and it doesn't lose its potency. And this, the darkest part of the year, the audacity to light a candle and bring light forth. It's something that can be snuffed out easily if it's not protected. Just like the life of the vulnerable God that we are in relationship could have been snuffed out. There's stories about that, what's coming next in Jesus's story. This light, the vulnerability of our God needs our care. It's the subversive truth of this story that we keep telling. And so, my friends, as we light this candle, as we sing this age-old song, my question for you is, what will we do this Christmas when we are confronted with all of the vulnerability in this world, all of the vulnerability in ourselves? My prayer for all of us is that we receive care, the tending of that God, that Emmanuel, which is planted in each and every one of us. And that we tend that spark, that flame, that candle within everyone in this room and beyond. Amen.